On today's Comfort Kills episode, God called Ginger Baerg and her husband to grow their family by fostering and adopting. Over the past 7 years, the Baerg family has fostered 6 kids and have adopted 2, becoming a family of 7. These days, she's sharing her story by authoring her own children's book called My Patchwork Family. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to have Ginger with me here today. Ginger is a teacher and an author, and I'm very, very excited to hear about her journey, her story, and just what got her to where she is today. So, Ginger, why don't you share your story with us?
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. So as you said, my full-time job is I'm a high school math teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been doing that since I graduated high school. And I had a pretty traditional backstory as far as went to college and I fell in love, got married pretty young. A few years later, we started having kids. And after we had 3 kids, my husband and I really felt called to do foster care and adoption.
Okay.
And so we started down, that journey. Really not, I don't feel like you really know what you're getting yourself into till you actually get into it.
Right.
And so we have done foster care and adoption for about 7 years. And we've had 6 kiddos that we have fostered. And 2 of them we've actually adopted out of foster care when it became apparent that they were needing an adoptive family.
Yeah.
And through that, I realized that there's so many people that don't really know about foster care and what goes into it. And so I wanted to share the story of our family. And so I wrote a children's book from my oldest biological son's perspective, and what his kind of journey, through it was with us. Which was huge out of my comfort zone because as a math teacher, I'm not usually necessarily the most creative or, like that is definitely like out of my comfort zone, but it's been an interesting journey and I've learned a lot and I've gotten a lot of support. I definitely couldn't have done it without that, but so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
All right. So, Ginger, can you elaborate a little bit more on what led you down the journey of fostering and then considering adopting and how old your kids were at the time when all of this transpired?
For sure. So my kids at the time were 6, 4, and 2. And I was actually at a women's social at my church, just eating some ice cream. And another woman was sharing, they were in the process of adopting their 3rd from actually overseas. And as I was like mid-bite of ice cream, all of a sudden, God just spoke to me. It was like, you're supposed to adopt. And I was like, what? Because it came out of nowhere. My husband and I had just planned to have 4-kid organic family, and so I went home and I told him, I was like, I think we're supposed to adopt. And initially he was like, no, I don't think so. And so I just prayed and I told God, okay, if you want us to adopt, you need to tell him, because I don't want it to be where I'm trying to push him down that path or drag him or anything like that. Because foster care and adoption is just, it's too much of a calling to like not be 100% in it together. And so it was actually a few months later where he came home from church one day and he was like, you're right. Like God told me at church, we're supposed to adopt. And so it was amazing. And I still get goosebumps when I think about it. And so at that point, he went back to school to get his engineering degree and he had one more semester. So we spent that semester just praying and researching all the ways of adoption, because there's so many amazing ways that you can help kiddos in need, whether it's domestic or foreign, foster care, infant. And we really felt at the end of that, that foster to adopt was what we were called to do. So.
Okay. Wow. And so you were out with your friends having coffee, right? Is that right?
Ice cream.
Ice cream.
Ice cream social, yeah.
And in the ice cream social, so okay, I need to hear or understand more of what you heard or what you saw or what was the pivotal point for you? Like, not was it the ice cream? Was it just the kids around you?
I don't know. I feel like it. All I can explain, it was just like I don't know, this
Yeah.
deep longing and calling that came
Wow.
from nowhere. I mean, I just
Wow.
went there to have ice cream with
Yeah.
friends. And I was very supportive, obviously, of my friend adopting overseas. They're amazing
Uh-huh.
parents. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, go for it. But it was one of those, like, that's you, not
Right.
me. And then
Yeah.
halfway through, I just knew that that's what we were supposed to do. It
Okay.
was just like the
Mm-hmm.
Holy Spirit just put it on my heart, and I knew that
That's
that's what we were
amazing.
supposed to do.
That is so
So I
amazing.
don't even know how to explain it. It wasn't like an
Right.
audible voice. It wasn't, it
Yeah.
was just like, and
It
then it
wasn't
was
a
like a
clear.
fire in my pit. Like
Uh-huh.
it just wouldn't go away. It wouldn't go away. It was just like growing, this like calling and
Wow.
desire. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So in your experience as a high school teacher, did you interact with children who were in the foster care system? Is this how kind of you felt more comfortable with knowing that that was your path? Or is this brand new for you? Or maybe family members have had children that they've adopted or fostered? Like how were you familiar with this? If this, I guess for those of us who have never kind of had that affect us personally, what was your
Um,
story?
so I did have a few students that were in foster care, but not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not actually come from a situation growing up like
Mm-hmm.
with it,
Mm-hmm.
that just wasn't something that I was exposed to. So it was just when my husband and I were like, we talked to a lot of friends that have adopted.
Mm-hmm.
We really researched just all the different ways of adoption, and that's actually when we learned a lot more about foster care and adoption.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I would say I was relatively ignorant. Like it's like I knew it existed,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I didn't really know a lot about it. It
Right.
was very, very much like that's an awesome thing for other people to do, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
didn't really impact my life. And then once we started the process, then I was able to connect with more foster families and build that
Uh-huh.
support and learned, obviously so much more about it.
Right.
But going in, I would say I was very uninformed before I started the whole process.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So can I ask more about the type of resources that you sought out and that you were able to learn? Some of the things that most people who are ignorant to the topic and the area, what is it that you've learned? Where did you go to find these resources? How do you learn more?
So the main thing to be a foster parent in Kansas, and most states have something similar, you have to go through a pretty intensive training, which
Mm-hmm.
I am totally on board for.
Right.
And so ours was 10 weeks worth of trainings for
Okay.
about 2 to 3 hours a week. And you learned just about the system, about how to interact with, families, your workers, how to be a safe foster family, some of the trauma the kids are coming from and all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely like trying to, drink a lake out of a straw. Like there's only so much you can put in there.
Right.
And so most of the learning I feel like has been after, we started.
Okay.
It's almost like, as a teacher, yes, I did all that training, but it
Yeah.
wasn't until like 3
Real
years
world.
in that
Yeah.
I felt like I actually knew how to be a teacher.
Yeah. Yep.
But surrounding yourself with like positive, encouraging foster families
Mm-hmm.
is really important, because it is something that's really hard. Like, I'm not going to lie and say like, oh, it's sunshine and roses. I mean, it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my entire life, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also one of the most challenging and difficult things. So you
Right.
need to surround
Right.
yourself with people that'll let you be real,
Uh-huh.
but will also encourage you and support you and give you helpful advice. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say if you're curious, find some people, seek out foster families that are positive and supportive and,
Mm-hmm.
willing to kind of share, but not have that negative, only focus on the negative, that negative
Mm-hmm.
bent that you can
Mm-hmm.
see so much.
Yeah, yeah. So we had an incident. Well, so I'm a registered nurse by trade and a pediatric nurse on top of that. So we've had situations where we've had kids waiting at the hospital solely because they're waiting on somebody who is a medical foster care provider or
Mm-hmm.
caretaker so that they can bring them home. But just finding people who are certified to be medical
Mm-hmm.
foster care parents are very, very difficult. And so our kids will stay there for a long, long period of time. Do you know a little bit more about that you can share with the folks out there? And
Yeah, so there's different in Kansas, they call them levels of being a
Okay.
foster parent, and you need different training and certification, for different levels. So there's just kind of, I guess you call your basic traditional foster parent, and you still need, trainings, and you need recertification. And there's a lot that goes into it. But if, if children have a certain level of medical needs or trauma needs or things like that, then they can't go to just that traditional foster home. They need one that's had more training in their specific needs.
Right.
And so for our second kiddo that we adopted, there was a lot more trauma and emotional need. And so we had to get training and get recertified at a next level, like a trauma centered foster home.
Gotcha.
And then for the medical one, that's even more intensive. And unfortunately for us, with us both working full time, that was something we never felt like we could do because we didn't have the ability to take care of medical need as far as the time to like be home with them. And so that's something that I feel like is an amazing calling in order to be able to have that time to be able to meet those medical needs. And it's definitely much needed.
Right. So you mentioned that you went into this doing foster to adopt. Is there a difference if somebody were to just go in and be solely just a foster parent with no intentions to adopt to switch over, or if you are fostering to adopt but not necessarily connecting with that child and so you don't want to commit, or how does that all work?
Yeah, and some of that's probably state by state. For Kansas kind of switches back and forth whether you're technically fostered to adopt or not. But what we just let the worker know is we want to foster. And if they need an adoptive family, we're very open to that. However, until the adoption's finalized, there's really no guarantees in any type of adoption, but especially in foster care. So even if it looks like it's going to go to adoption, there's really no guarantees that things won't change.
Right.
But usually, if you're fostering and you have a really good relationship and there isn't a family member that's wanting to adopt, they'll ask you, even if you're not necessarily a foster to adopt, if you're willing to adopt, to keep that relationship, to keep that stability, for the child.
Yeah.
And, if you're, fostering to adopt, but it's just really not working, there definitely isn't any sort of thing where you're locked into it if it's just not working. Obviously, you try to do everything you can to keep that kid there, but there's definitely the option to say this isn't working out. Let's try to find him another permanent home.
Right. And so can you elaborate a little bit more on I can't remember where I was going with this. I had like a really good question in mind, but I guess I'm thinking for the kids biological family members, is there a level of, I guess it's different state by state, but is there a level of, okay, so biological parents are not interested or are not able to, and then do you go to cousins, aunts and uncles, grandma, grandpa? Like, what are the different tiers of, at what point does a state finally say, okay, this child is fully eligible to be adopted because we've already gone through, XYZ channels of family members, and then everything else is extended family. And so we are stopping there, or we're continuing to entertain extended family members as well?
So a lot of it definitely has to do with the state, and it also has to do with the level of relationship, not like cousins or anything, but like actual like connection. Like, are these people you've hung out with a lot? Or is this someone you've never met? They take that into consideration. But usually what they do is after the parental rights have been severed, is what they call it. Like they determine that it's not going to be safe for the children to go back to their biological parents. Then they start asking, foster families and other people that have relationship with the kids to submit I can't remember what it's called, but it's kind of a document saying you'd like to be considered for adoption.
Okay.
And then they actually have a big meeting with like everyone who's involved with that child's case, and they determine, who they feel like is the best adoptive resource for that child. And so everyone who is interested, would kind of put their information in there. You have to do a case study. You have to show that you're financially able to take care of the children. And so it really is determined a certain amount case by case. So, but anyone who's related is able to put in that they would be interested, in
Right. Yeah.
possibly being an
Okay.
adoptive resource.
Okay. Okay. And I know, and you don't have to go into details if you don't like, but I know that being a foster parent comes with financial incentives. And I've heard before from our previous guest, Roman, who spoke about foster parenting as well, is that the financial incentives that come with it is only enough to really care for the child. If not, you're still putting in more. Like I remember him saying
Yeah.
he took his child on a trip to Disney World and did things. And so really he's still coming out of pocket quite a bit. So to debunk the myth that you can make money off of being a foster parent for those out there who have ill intentions. But I also know that you've mentioned during our meet and greet that there's also financial assistance as well for the adoption part. And then I guess thereafter, can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I do not know how people can possibly make money just being a foster parent unless they're not taking care of the child, which in my opinion, I guess one of my biggest things that get me mad. But especially when we were fostering little kids, like babies, diapers and formula, I mean it didn't even come close to just covering diapers and formula. And we could have done WIC and some other programs like that, but it just came down to, is it worth the time to go and get all of that paperwork done? So, and then there are programs, because for instance, our oldest one that we've adopted has a lot of trauma and she has a lot of extra needs. We're able to get some help with those kind of things, like, her therapy will be paid without it coming out of our pocket, until she's 18.
That's
and
good.
they, help us be able to do some of extra things to get her some of that extra help that she kind of needs, extra outlets, so you can kind of explain some of those extra things that come with helping them meet their needs.
Okay.
And so, and then when our little guy, they did actually help. I was kind of surprised. They helped a little bit with his daycare until he was school age too, just to help take some of that extra burden off. But still, it's not one of those things where you can, make money off it. It just helps with that extra burden.
So our personal story that we have is my son made a friend in middle school. It was in middle school. This was when we were stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And the friend that he ended up making became his best friend for years. And the child was a foster child. And we ended up meeting the foster parents and we got along great. And we were able to, give him some normality of having a friend come sleep over and then vice versa. And so we really helped. We heard his story and we were just shocked. But then the family could no longer continue to care for him because they had to move. They were being stationed somewhere else outside of state. And so they had to relinquish their foster parent rights. I'm not sure what the correct terminology would be, but they had to relinquish that. And he went back to the county, and within the county, they had no room for him. So they switched him to a different county. So he was still in the state of North Carolina, just 2 counties over. And we stayed in touch with him. Fortunately, the former foster mom continued to pay for his phone bill. And so he was able to still have that to stay in touch with her, because she loved him. She loved him dearly. And so by doing so, we were able to continue to keep tabs on how he was doing. And so we went to go pick him up and bring him over for a weekend. And the terrible stories he's told us he had bounced around in that 6-month window to 3 different foster parents. He had, he said he was hungry every day. I mean, when I saw him, I fed him that whole weekend, was nothing but just feeding him and trying to get him nice and plump again to make up for the weight that he had lost. But it was just so awful. But he had said that he wanted to take one of his video games to the game store to sell back to them and just make a little bit of money. So he had some spending money. And I mean, maybe tops, he would have made $20 off of the video game. And his foster mom at the time told him, okay, if I'm going to drive you to the game store, you're going to pay me for gas, $20. And so, for him, it was but that's how much money I'm maybe going to even make off of the video game. So it was just really, really disheartening to hear the stories that he had. And just, it was so sad. But eventually the family ended up not the original foster family that we met ended up not leaving. So they stayed and was able to bring him back. And so it was a
Oh,
great
good.
story. And then they adopted him and they moved to
Oh,
California
that's
together.
awesome.
So it was just such an amazing story. But that was when we were like, okay, we have to do something. We have to intervene. This is like our son's best friend. We have to do something. And then we even had a conversation with our son. And I said, are you okay with the idea of us becoming his foster parents? If we started to go down that journey of finding out what it takes to be a foster parent, get certified, and then bring him back to this county so that we can be his foster parents. And he was like, all right, that'll work, and my son was really excited about that. So we started kind of going down that journey of doing the homework, doing the resources. But I don't think and that's only because we were personally affected by that. But I know as a pediatric nurse from that standpoint that our country is so limited with foster parents out there, and there's so many kids who need it. And so I think the message is we need to just put it out there more and more that this is very much needed. I mean, I personally at that time, because we ended up moving, but weren't able to go through that go down that journey with him because he ended up going back to his original family. But it's still like tugging at me inside that there's something we could still do for our community, even if it's just offering a place to stay for a couple of weeks until this kid ends up, the state can figure out what's going on and getting them right again and fixing their situation so that they can either get them back home or get them more stable. So I don't know. That's me, but I know, Ginger, you have so much more to say about that, I'm sure. So please, the floor is yours.
Well, no, it's so true. And it's so hard because there
Mhm.
is such a need. But, for instance, currently we're taking a break from fostering because
Mhm.
our oldest daughter does have so many needs.
Mhm.
And, I feel like we need to focus on helping her through some of this trauma and help
Right.
her to feel permanent. And
Yeah.
she had a similar thing where we actually, fostered her for a year when she was in kindergarten
Mhm.
with her two brothers, and then they ended up leaving.
Mhm.
And then the worst thing about that was we didn't know what happened to them, where they were. And
Yeah.
then we found out, years later that they had been split, like the brother and the sister were no longer together.
Oh,
And
wow.
she had been in so many homes since she left us. I mean, it broke my heart when I heard. I was
Yeah.
like, what? No,
Yeah.
bring her back. Like, so as
Right.
soon as we knew that she was needing a home, we brought her back. But it breaks your heart to
Mhm.
know that they went through all of that. And
Right.
yeah, so I yeah, we definitely need more good foster
Mhm.
families that are willing to get their heart
Yes.
broken. And I know it sucks, I've
Yeah.
been there, but it's
Yeah.
what the kids need. It's what they need to grow to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I've had many coworkers who have ended up adopting some of the children that they've cared for. And just the stories, and it is, you're right. Be ready for the heartbreak, but be ready to know that like your heart may be broken, but then you may also come out of this on the other side with an adopted child and really change their lives and impact them forever. But I've had people go through that where, the biological mom is still involved somewhat, but she doesn't want to let go, but she's not in her right place to be able to care for the child. And so there's all of this back and forth where the state really wants to do what's in favor of the biological mother, but biological mother is not in the right place to be able to care appropriately for the child. And so I remember one of my coworkers, it was just back and forth before she finally, I mean, it took like a good year and a half before she finally had full custody and was able to finalize the adoption paper. But, it's not an easy battle. And just because maybe the child seems available and
Mm-hmm.
is, ready for adoption at this time when you meet them for the first time and you fall in love, and then 2 years later you're still battling that battle with the state. So crazy, crazy. So can you tell me, you mentioned in one of your bio information that to let go of perfectionism. So can you explain that a little bit? How does that tie into what you're doing, and just how do you feel like your story can help people with that?
So I am a huge perfectionist,
Hmm.
and I think that's maybe partially why God gave me 5 kids, because I can't be as big of a perfectionist with 5. I feel like if I only had one,
Yeah.
I would be so controlling, it would be a mess. So,
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, I want everyone to see how good I do things, and I want everything to be good. And I have had to learn to just let that go and, live life. And I'm still struggling with it, especially when I get really stressed out. I know I'm stressed out because I start wanting to control everything again. And I want everything to go back to like perfect. But one thing with doing this book, because it's so far out of my comfort zone, like I couldn't quote unquote do it perfect. Like I didn't even know how to plan. I didn't even know what to do. And so that was really good for me because I was able to kind of let it happen a little bit more and lean on other people. And, just how amazing that went. It's helped me be a little bit more motivated to let certain things, other things, go a little bit more and let them just happen naturally.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and discuss your book a little bit? So you went through this journey and then you found a calling to now create a book to inspire and educate others, I guess. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it? What is it called? And what are the topics that you discuss?
Sure. So it's called My Patchwork Family. And we called it that because our families, all patched together from different backgrounds.
I love it.
And it's designed just to start that conversation and also to encourage other families that do foster care to have a book that's like, hey, they're like us, because I feel like a lot of times it's not well represented in kids' books. And just to share my family's specific story, to not just have, oh, this is a nice pretend make believe story, but this really happened. And this, is what it was like. And I also wanted to tell it from my oldest son's perspective, because I feel like a lot of times people don't realize the sacrifice and the love and everything that the biological kids of foster families do. They very much can be like, oh my gosh, being a foster parent would be really hard. But I don't think they always understand how hard it is for the other kids too. And I'm so proud of my kids because they've always just loved any kids that are in our house, like wholeheartedly, like immediately. And their hearts break just as much, if not more, as ours when they leave. Like I remember the first kiddos when they left, they were with us for like a year before they left. And like my kids literally were trying to give them like all of their possessions. Like, take this. I mean, oh my God. I think all of us cried almost nonstop for like a week. I mean, and it's just, I want that part of the story also to be told because I just feel like it's not maybe understood as well. And then for families that are going to start doing foster care, I think it's a good resource for their kids to have that voice and to be able to kind of see like, yeah, this is what it's like as a biological kid.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, Ginger, that you went the path of utilizing your son's perspective and using that to share the story because it is very different. I think as adults, we can kind of all say we have similar thoughts or similar ideas, but never do we ever consider the child's perspective, which is actually, I think, why we even asked my son and sat down with him to say, listen, this is your friend. We're doing this not for you per se, but we feel like we should do this for him. And it just happens that you're best friends. And so using the child's perspective and understanding that they have a very unique one as well is very, very important. So I think that's brilliant that you incorporated that. So thank you. So what are who are the types of people who would benefit from this book? Would it be those who are thinking about fostering, those who are thinking about adopting, those who are currently in it? At what point is it right for them to say, this is a good book for you to start reading?
So I actually tried to write it for a very diverse audience. Everyone from just, I want to kind of learn more or start the conversation just about foster care with my children, even if we're not thinking of doing it, to someone who maybe they're starting down the process, and this can be a resource to open up those conversations with their own children. And then I have, quite a few friends who have adopted out of foster care that say they really like it because it gives their kids a story that's like, this is like us. And so I tried to write it to where all of the audiences, kind of wherever they are, it can be a different way to start different talking points, but get that conversation going with your kids or even with your spouse.
Yeah. Perfect. So what advice would you give families who are considering?
First of all, find an amazing supportive network. That that's invaluable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even some of the people that love you, and they really do love you, when things get hard, sometimes they encourage you like, oh, this is just too hard. Just give up. And so you have to be careful making sure that when you are telling your really, really hard stuff, it's people that will listen to you and let you vent, but then will also encourage you and will remind you of your calling, remind you of all the good stuff, all the growth, because you're going to have days where it's just too much, it's too hard, you're done. And if you have someone there that's being like, yeah, you should just give up, that's what you're gonna, I mean, that's what you kind of almost want permission to do. So you need someone that's like, yeah, it does suck, you know, I'm gonna come over, we're gonna cry together, and then tomorrow we're gonna just keep on going. And so that's definitely number one. And number two, you know, if you're married, make sure you guys are on the same page, because it is too hard of a journey to do if you're not.
That's great. That's great advice.
Yeah, it will tear you apart if you're not 100% together on it. So
yeah. Which is going back to what you were saying, like you pitch the idea to your husband, and then, you know, he's not so convinced, but then finally his moment comes months later. And that's incredibly important, because if it can't be a one-person journey, you have to do this together, because there will be difficult times, there will be difficult children, there will be difficult situations, and you have to be able to do this together as a partnership. And so can't do it by yourself, for sure. That's for sure. Wow. So I actually have one of the nurses who work at my organization. She ended up telling her story that she adopted, when she adopted her son. She's a single mom. She adopted her son, and who was her patient. And when she went to foster her son, and I think it was still in the fostering stage, when she was fostering her child at the time, his brother, who was within a year's age of him, was also in the foster system that she learned about. So she ended up taking in both children. And over time, I think after 2 years or so, ended up adopting both of them as a single mom, not in a relationship. But so for her, I was just like, wow, you know, like I can't even imagine, like I would not have been able to do something so brave and courageous and so selfless at that time, being single and not having a spouse, and putting yourself in a situation where you might not be as entertained by other men, you know. But I guess in her mind, she's like, well, if they don't want me and my kids, then forget them. But you know, in that situation, I was just like, wow, that is incredible, that is brave. And then again, even in a partnership, you have to both be aligned and on the same page with each other. So incredible. So what do you think?
Awesome that she did that.
Yeah. And what do you think is what are some of the perks of, I guess, maybe being a teacher and understanding children and their different personalities, and being in the situation that you are with providing foster care, adopting, in general, being a parent, but really like just I guess, being able to understand more perspectives and having met so many children through your career? How has that helped you?
So one thing that's really helped is just, I've had a lot of students that have been from trauma in the past. So it's not quite as shocking to me when they have kind of a trauma episode as it is to my husband, because you know, he's an engineer, so he, you know, really hasn't had that kind of, you know, experience. It's also been insanely helpful just from the education perspective, helping with like, you know, IEP process, you know, special education, that kind of thing, because I understand how that works, and I'm able to kind of speak that language and help make sure my, you know, foster kiddos are getting all of the support they need, and making sure I can advocate. I feel like I can advocate really well because I'm kind of in the system. Like I know how to ask in order to get, you know, the resources they need. And then just, having seen that, like, okay, that's actually kind of normal for that age. Like, I know we've never had a 13-year-old girl before, but that's pretty normal. I mean, it's annoying, but it's normal, you know, whereas if you only have your own kiddos, you may not know what that looks like. So
yeah, it's definitely different for sure. I think, you know, this is a conversation I have with a friend of mine, where she entered into a relationship and is now married, where she had 2 children from a different relationship. And so now he's learning how to be a father, but just really out of nowhere have these two and have to understand these personalities, as opposed to being there from the very beginning where he was able to watch them grow and understand their personalities. Now he's having to just accept them as they are. And it's funny and it's quite confusing, but, but he's just like, I don't know what to do with the teenage boy. And she goes, well, you've been a teenage boy, you should know. And it's funny. But yeah, you're right. And so having your perspective makes it a little bit easier, because now you can just turn around and tell your husband, well, this is actually very normal. And I think it makes it a little bit easier, just a little bit easier for you guys than most fosterers who come from different types of backgrounds, who just don't have that same exposure. All right, so let's go back to speaking about the Patchwork Family a little bit more. So you went forward with it. You self-published as well. Can you please just explain the process of that? I'm not sure if it's a lot of quarantine projects that are out there, but I've also I'm very intrigued. And so right now my world is filled with publishing and illustrators and authors and everything. And so I'm hearing so much and it's all coming at me at rapid speed. I would love for you to just educate me on what the process looks like and what the journey looks like for you.
Yeah, so I actually tried to go for traditional publishing. I put my book out there about a year and a half ago, and I never heard back from any of them. So at the time, I just kind of was like, oh, maybe it's not a good book. So I just kind of tabled it. And then at the beginning of this year, or 2020, actually, I was like, no, you know what? I'm just going to self-publish it. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it. And so I joined some Facebook groups that are like self-publishing, and it's like people that have been successful in it, and they're kind of helping mentor us newbies.
Okay.
And I learned so much from that. I would have made so many more mistakes if I was just trying to do it on my own. And they kind of warn you like, hey, these are the things to look at if a printer's saying this, you might want to be careful, or like they really had good things to just kind of be aware of, be mindful of. And that was amazing. And I was able, because of some recommendations from one of those groups, I found a printer that was so patient and so kind, and she was willing to help me with all of my crazy, I'm sure they were like ignorant questions, because I was like, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. And so she was able to help me, because I wanted good quality, but the problem with picture books is if you want good quality, you have to kind of order in bulk. And I don't have a lot of money just kind of sitting around. So I was like, well, how do I order in bulk when I don't have a lot of money? And so she was like, well, you can do a Kickstarter. And at that point, I actually didn't even know what a Kickstarter was. And so she walked me through, she showed me some examples to kind of use as, hey, these are ones that you can kind of use as good examples, like kind of model off of these, they were really successful. And so I figured, you know what do I have to lose? Like, if I don't get funded, then I don't get funded. And so I did a Kickstarter, and I was amazed that I was able to get fully funded. I had so much support. It was incredible. And so I was able to order, 1,000 books, and that, has spurred it on. And then it's just been a lot of trying to figure out, okay, so now I have 1,000 books, and how do I market and sell these books and get them out to people, where it can, really help spread the word. And so that's been just, and I'm still in that, trying to figure out the best way to kind of get the word out,
get the word out,
sure
get them on
outside
shelves.
of just my circle know about the book.
Exactly. Oh, wow. That's I think the hardest part, right? Is like, okay, you've done this amazing work. You've created this book that is so informative for the families who have similar situations and similar journeys. But how do you get it out there? And one thing I've learned is just lots and lots of marketing, and lots of just, I don't know if it's reaching out to people and just saying, hey, I got this book. But I have a friend right now that I am going to tap his brain for more information, but he is, not sure if you know of him, but he went viral in 2018, maybe. It was before COVID, maybe it's 2019. I have the tendency to merge 2019 and 2020 these days, but it was pre-COVID, and he went viral for a speaker competition, and it was called the Unbalanced Paddleboarder. So he was a stand-up paddleboarder who ended up having an autoimmune disease that happened, and it changed his life and flipped it upside down. And then he So he shared that story. And I actually went to go see him when he was here in Miami doing his book tour. And at that time, it was just now at that, he was excited to tell me it was just released at Barnes and Nobles. And I'm just like, all right, when I'm ready for when it's my turn, I'm going to have to ask lots and lots of questions. And it's just like, he's gained so much traction, but I'm not sure if it's the story or if it's him or what it is, like what the secret sauce is behind that to get it on shelves and to do and be as successful as he has been. So for sure, like I agree with you. I think, I'm gonna have to find somebody who has the answer to all of this and get them on the show for sure, because I think, I love that you've done something so amazing like that. And we definitely need to find ways and to get it out there, to really just get people to know that this exists and it'll be helpful. It could be a great Christmas gift. It could be a great, anything, birthday gift, everything. So yeah, for sure. What are some advice you would have for somebody who are interested in doing something very similar, doing a children's book or just writing a book in general? The journey that you went through and the kind of the struggles that you had, what are some advice that you have for them?
I would say definitely find some positive, supportive Facebook
Yeah.
groups and just do a ton of
Okay.
research before you commit to like anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially be really careful of what are called vanity publishers that will
Mm,
kind of take your money and publish it, but it's just, I don't know. It's it's hard to identify them sometimes unless I did a
mm-hmm.
lot of research on there about like, okay, is this a reputable printer? And so I was able to find, like I said, mine that I found and was recommended to me, I've been so happy with. And so just making sure you really do your research
Mm-hmm.
before, because you don't want to have paid all this money and not have anything good to show for it, to take
Right.
your, baby, give it to somebody, and then it's like
Yeah,
not good. And
exactly.
then I think just starting to like, I don't know, talk to people about it before it's available,
Right.
kind of getting people excited, keeping them updated. People really do want to support local authors. And if you can get the
Mm,
word out and keep them updated. And I started kind of putting out little teasers, like as soon as my illustrator started
yeah.
working,
Yeah.
who also, if you have a friend who's an amazing illustrator, I highly recommend finding a friend and having your
Yeah.
friend illustrate it because it makes it so much more fun. And then it's
Oh,
like the
yeah.
two of you get to do
Mm-hmm.
fun, geeky stuff together. It's amazing. So find a friend that's really good at art. That would be
Uh-huh.
my number one. And
Okay.
so I would just do little teasers as she would finish some of the like artwork.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh man, check out this. And then, I'd
Yeah.
put a little quote here and there and just kind of start getting that word out.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Kickstarter was amazing for me to get outside of my bubble
Mm-hmm.
because it was so much easier for people to share it with other people. And so it's a great tool to just get, I don't know, get some traction.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
one thing I did is I offered them they could buy 2 books and donate one. And I had
Mm-hmm.
a ton of people do
Oh,
that. And I
wow.
donated it to the foster care system that we worked with so they could
Yeah.
get them to foster families. And
Yeah.
so that was something that I thought was really good to get them out into, some of
Yeah.
these families that could really benefit.
Right, right. Have you considered, that just made me think, have you considered like not cold calling, but cold email, I guess would be the right like phrase for this generation? Just sending out emails to the different types of foster agencies out there, like across the world.
I need to do more. That
Yeah.
is definitely one
Huh.
of those things. I am still working on the wording of cold emails. Like I feel like
Yeah.
that's one of my biggest struggles is
Okay.
like getting it worded well and where people are like, ooh, I want to hear more
Right.
about this. And so
Yeah.
that is something that I'm still kind of researching and looking into, like
Mm-hmm.
press releases and like those kind of things, and like how do
All
you
right.
word them to where you actually will get people interested in what
Yeah.
you're sending them.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So let's go back to the illustrator part. I'm very intrigued. I saw that you had a different illustrator because I was like, oh, did she do her own art or not? And so because I'm thinking about doing children's books, but from the perspective of a child going into the hospital and having treatments done. So I'm very very invested in doing a lot of the background research right now. And so when I saw that you had an illustrator, I was just like, oh, I want to ask more about that. I've seen lots of illustrators on these different Facebook groups and lots of price ranges even. So that's been quite interesting to see what people think are appropriate and not appropriate for price range. So Ginger, do you have any insight on maybe the journey that you had before finding your artist friend, or did you always knew that she was there all along?
So I had her in mind all along, but if I was going to do traditional, they want to do the illustrations for you.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I decided to self-publish, I already knew, like, yeah.
Okay. So you're just lucky. Oh, I lost you. I lost you for a second, but I don't hear you. You're on mute.
I apologize
Oh,
on that. I'm not sure what happened. My internet like dropped for a minute.
no worries. No worries.
Okay. So I'm just going to start over because I'm not sure where I cut out.
Sure.
So I knew I wanted my friend to illustrate, but when I was looking at possibly doing traditional, I saw when I did the research that they usually want to do the illustrations for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hadn't had her do any illustrations when I was looking at the traditional route. But then as soon as I decided to self-publish, I was like, okay, let's do it, you and me.
Yeah.
And we actually met like right before the quarantine hit, and we talked about what we wanted it to look like. And so so she worked on it that whole time.
Oh,
and
wow. Perfect project.
It was incredible because she's also the one who does her photographs. So a lot of what she did in the watercolors was from the photographs she took of our family. And so it's kind of a really cool connection about,
very
and
nice.
she knows my kids and she knows us, so she could really capture our personalities. So it was perfect. I feel like it would have been a lot harder with an illustrator we never met.
Right.
To like catch that,
Yeah. So that's, exactly my question. So you got very lucky. And I don't know if I have anybody in my circle who's talented to the level where they would be able to do that. But that was one of the things that I saw was people say you just give them your book and then they'll be able to read and make illustrations off of it. But I thought, like, how collaborative is it really if if I want it to be a certain way, can I have suggestions or insight? So. Okay.
Hey guys, can you get off the computers? My internet keeps dropping.
I hear you. You're back.
Sorry, I think my kids must be streaming something. And so I'm like, everybody get off your computers. I'm trying to talk.
Highly likely. Did you get a chance to hear what I said or?
So you said, all I heard was, I think you got lucky
okay.
And I cut. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. So what I was saying was that I think I think you really got lucky with having a friend and knowing your family and knowing your style. Because one of the things that I read when I was looking at illustrators were some of the comments were, well, you give them your story and then they make pictures around it. But I wasn't sure how collaborative it really could be if I'm just handing over my story and then if I can even trust that, and it's just like, because people aren't necessarily from around here. They're from all over the world who are illustrating these types of pictures for the children's books. And so I'm like, I don't know if I can trust that. Like, if I'm just handing over my story, or can I tell them, no, I want page 2 to look like this, and really capture this essence, and then page 4 to look like this. Or if it's just like, here, do what you can with it and like understand between the lines what I'm looking for. So I'm not sure how collaborative they really can be.
Well, and I think that probably depends on the illustrator. So I would highly recommend, if you don't know them, really researching and getting good recommendations and talk to people that have used them and be like, okay, explain your relationship. Like, how collaborative were you? Were they willing to take input and redo things, or was it, this is what I'm giving you and this is just what it is? Because I think that's really important before you start to know exactly,
right,
like, okay, yeah, you can give me some rough drafts, but I want some input too, because this is my brainchild, this is my baby. And so I think getting those resumes and then actually talking to people that have used them is vital.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I struggle with is I have a very specific like view on what I want things. And this goes back to like, what our discussion earlier about being a perfectionist. And I know what I want in my mind. And so when I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking through these different illustrator portfolios, there's certain ones that I'm like, that's not my style, but that is
Mm-hmm.
my style. And so
Mm-hmm.
first you have to kind of go through the struggle of finding the right illustrator for your style, and then you have to kind of filter through that and find somebody who matches your work ethics and will be able to do multiple edits, be collaborative. And so it's interesting. I'm only beginning this journey of entertaining this idea at all, but it's been very, very interesting to see.
Yeah, well, and I think you have the exact right. Yeah, it's going to take time, but it's going to be
Yeah.
so worth the time.
Right.
Because if you can find an illustrator that you just connect with and the style's
Mm-hmm.
the same, I really feel like with kids' books, the illustrator sort of makes or breaks the book. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're the one
Yes,
that actually brings it to life, and it needs to be
exactly.
the life you want it to have.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
finding the right style and then drilling down, it's not going to be quick or easy, but it'll be worth it. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think you
Mm-hmm.
need to keep going on it though. I think that's
Okay.
going to be an amazing
Thank
book.
you. Thank you. And I see like a series from it with different types of
Mm-hmm.
diagnoses. And, because I think children a lot of times are just given a diagnosis and then you're expected to kind of learn as you go. And I think we can prepare them a little bit better for that. There's definitely ways for us to say, here's a book that will help you. There's on your journey. At least there will be a couple of things in there that you may resonate with, or you may see that you're going to experience as well. And that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that I love to advocate from a children's hospital. We often we're looking at different innovative ideas, and I've seen different ways to innovate as far as like even virtual reality. Before going into a surgery, here's a virtual reality of what it could look like. And so you
Mm-hmm.
see yourself in the bed, you see yourself wheeling through, you're being introduced to this nurse, to the anesthesiologist, and then it's really like walking the child through so that they can not be as stressed and as like nerve-wracking for them before they actually
Mm-hmm.
have surgical day. So lots of
Well,
things
and I
we can
think
do.
for a parent, that's an amazing resource too, because they are just trying to figure out the diagnosis and
Mhm.
they're trying to do their research and then
Right.
try to figure out how to explain it to your child. Like having that
Yeah.
would be an amazing resource for parents that are,
Yeah.
struggling to probably just be able to understand themselves what it's going to look like, let alone
Exactly.
help their kids through the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you. So Ginger, if I gave you a billboard, what would it say?
Ugh. And so that's one of the things that I struggle with the most is how to boil down all of the thoughts in my brain about my
Yeah.
book into like one thing.
Yeah.
And I think it would just be, so I have a saying from my book that I
Mhm.
use on a lot of my like free, like where I give out stuff to people. And it's
Yeah.
just, it says love stitches us together. And I think
Okay.
it's just a matter of with a family, we all come from different places, but love stitches us together
Uh-huh.
and makes our
Uh-huh.
family strong.
Yeah.
And so something along, those lines of,
Yeah.
we're all, we come in all over the place, different
Uh-huh.
families, different situations,
Right.
but we're all together
Yeah.
and we're stitched together.
No,
So
that's perfect. That's beautiful. And it's so relevant for our day and age. And it's something that people need to hear, whether you're in foster care or parenting or adoption or just a politician. I don't know, but we
yeah,
won't go down that road.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Ginger, there's also, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Is there anything that we could touch on that you'd like to touch on before we come to a close?
Hmm. I think it's just if you've ever thought about foster care, I highly
Mhm.
recommend just research it.
Okay.
If you're intimidated by it, you can do even what's called respite care, where you just take care of kids that just need a place, for a few nights, or
Hmm.
something where you just kind of like ease your way
Right.
into it, and or
Yeah.
if you know that foster care is not for you, see if you can find people that do foster care or adoption and how you can support them, because it
Hmm.
is hard. It
Yes.
is, you know it the whole it takes a village. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
I need my village. Like my village is how I've survived.
Yeah.
And so being the person that is like, hey, I'm bringing you dinner tonight
Uh-huh.
because you're like about
Yes.
to lose it, so like let me do
Yeah.
that for you. And I also say if you're called to it, just do it. Go for it. It's going to work out some way or another. Maybe
Hmm.
not how you thought it was going to, but it will.
Hmm.
And people will step up and help you if you ask them. And
Right,
so
right.
being willing to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfectionist that I've had to let go. Like, I can't do this on my own, so I need to quit pretending.
Yep.
And when people say, do you need something? And I do, I need to actually say, yes, I actually do. Like,
Yeah.
I need help. I remember one time I had one of my kiddos struggled with spelling words so bad. And as a math teacher, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a lot of strategies for spelling words.
Yeah.
And so one of my friends who taught younger kids was like, I feel like I need to ask if you need help with something. I was like, can you just do spelling words once a week with my son? And she was like, yeah, that'd be so easy. And I was like, you have no idea, like, the amount of stress that takes off of me and my family. Just 20 minutes once a week. And like, it was amazing. And she was like, I don't even feel like I'm really helping you. This is just what I do. And I was like, you don't know though. Like, it was, because that was the stress every week. And just having you do that was huge. So I think just finding ways to support.
Exactly.
Even if it's something that to you is like, that's not a big deal. Like, I can do that. But to that family, that could be
right.
a huge difference in just the environment and, the stress level and everything.
Yeah.
So.
No, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because I think it's so important. There's two perspectives from that. So there's the friend who may not necessarily understand why you chose to be a foster parent and see you go through and struggle with that. And they personally would not go down that journey, but they can still be of assistance, even if it's just making an extra meal or taking a child or two for a play date or something, so that you can just have some time to yourself and just kind of refill your cup. And then the other part is us, alpha females asking for help, being able to say, I really need help in this area, and being able to just say, yeah, you have to do it for yourself. So you have to take care of yourself and say those things. So thank you so much for that. Awesome, Ginger. Well, thank you so much. I've had such a great conversation with you. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to go back and do a lot of research, but I think that you bring a valuable message behind fostering and adopting. And I'm so thankful that you've created this book, The Patchwork Family, to put out there to the world, so that anybody who is interested at any point in their journey can resonate with this and be able to pick up this book and see that there are some good tips in there for them.
Awesome. Please keep researching and writing that book. I want to be able to see it when it comes out. It's going to be amazing.
Awesome. And Ginger, one last thing. So where can people find your information if they want to get in contact with you or look into your book more?
Sure. So my book is available on Amazon if you just search My Patchwork Family. And so you can do ebook or hardcover. It's also, I have a website. It's just called mypatchworkfamilybook.com. And you can buy the book there as well, or just get more information. And I have a few links, like if you're interested in learning more about foster care or being an advocate or just different things like that. And then my email address is really similar. It's just mypatchworkfamilybook@gmail.com. So I'd love if anyone is thinking about foster care and just wants someone who will answer questions, be candid, be supportive. If you're needing that, or if you are fostering and you're like, I need my community, like, I don't feel like I have someone positive. I mean, I would love to be that person to help you through some of these hard times, because I know so many people helped me through mine. So
perfect.
I would love to hear from you guys.
Great. Thank you so much for being a resource to the community. Thank you. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And until next time.
Awesome. Thank you.